It's really important, I think, for leaders to understand their role because their role is actually to be that visionary. It's their ideas that we're looking for. Yeah, you 100% need buy-in and you 100% need their input because they have information that you don't.
Mhm.
So input is critical on that team, but the leader is the decider. They have to understand that that is their job.
What if the real key to scaling your business isn't what you should start doing, but what you need to stop doing? Today's guest, Tara Landis, has propelled hundreds of entrepreneurs toward growth by teaching leaders how to let go, influence ethically, and build systems that truly last. Ready to find out which moves separate successful entrepreneurs from the rest? Tara's here to help us figure that out. Tara, welcome on Behind Their Success.
Thank you so much for having me, David. It's great to be here.
Yeah, absolutely, Tara. So tell us about you, where you come from, and what you do.
So I'm in Vancouver, Canada, and I'm a management consultant. I help small business leaders and managers figure out how to get to wherever they want to get to. They always have goals, and we sort of identify the different things that they can do, perhaps differently, sometimes very differently, sometimes just a tweak here and there to get where they want to get to.
Yeah, 100%. So, when you say you come in and looking at small businesses, like what kind of problems are you solving there? Or like what's a good like common problem that you see?
Yeah, well, there's sort of two sides to our business. So when we work with business owners in small business, we're usually helping them figure out how to get to whatever next level is that they want to get to. Sometimes they want to get out of the business and they want to sell it. Sometimes they just want to have a little bit more time with their families and not be run by that company. Sometimes they've got people issues. There's all sorts of different challenges. But where we focus is on small business because in small business, you can usually make changes pretty quickly. You have more authority to do so. The other side of our business is management training. And that's where, again, we're helping managers get to where they want to get to. Sometimes that even means leaving their career where they are and moving into something that's better suited. But more often than not, it's about being that sounding board when they've got specific challenges that they're trying to address and helping offer a different perspective on how they might be able to address those challenges.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah. And, it's, being in my business and my practice, I do, I'm not a management consultant. Some of my working with so many entrepreneurs over my career and stuff, I kind of fall in that line a little bit. Obviously I'm money and tax and stuff focused, but it's not it's super common for entrepreneurs to, when you're in your business and you're just operating day to day and you're so busy, you can't put your head up and understand like what the actual problems are. Right. And often having like a third party come in that have seen, this pattern 1,000 times before, right? Like, you get super, it's super easy. Like, oh, well, this is what you're doing. It's wrong. But can you speak to that too? Where it's just like, sometimes is there any like pushback from entrepreneurs? I'm sure there's some degree.
Yeah.
We're kind of hard to wrangle.
Yeah. So always, but it is about perspective, and there's no right answer to most business challenges. And so what it's less about trying to persuade them to our point of view and more about offering alternate points of view. So there are just so many ways to tackle a problem. And as you said, if you're working in your own business, you've got a very deep understanding of what's going on there. What we offer is a very superficial understanding of what's happening everywhere. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes that can spark an idea that leader or owner may not have had before. It's weird that you can draw parallels between running, say, a construction company and a law firm. But you can, because both employ people, and humans are pretty basic in the way they operate.
Yeah, they're pretty predictable, actually.
They're pretty predictable, exactly. So they both employ people. And also, with the companies that we work with, they typically aren't market leaders. They don't have like a 70% market share, and they're trying to figure out how to get the extra 30. They have a 0.01% market share, and they're maybe trying to get to 0.02 without completely exhausting themselves.
I've been down that road in my own practice, right? To where I was building and doing all the kinds of things that just, I didn't realize all the problems I was really creating for myself, because I really wasn't building systems and
Mm-hmm.
operations, and, everything was built around me. And,
And you can't stop and look at it, right? That's
yeah,
the
yeah, you
problem.
don't even have time. You built this whole prison that your head is just down forever now.
Yeah.
And it's like, you got to, and then it's very painful to try to break out of that, or it can be painful. And that's why people don't do it, because and I made some big moves trying to do that moving in that direction over the last year or so, where it's just
Mm-hmm.
like, I just cut off a big part of my business. It's like, we don't do any of that.
Yeah.
And the reason,
Which is terrifying.
it's scary, right? Like, it's scary because I just ran off a bunch of revenue, and then you're like,
Yep.
what's going to happen now, right?
Yep. Yeah,
Can you?
exactly. And you don't know. You don't know what's going to happen. We unfortunately we don't have a time machine at our company, so we can't accurately predict the future. We've just got a lot of probabilities going on.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
How do you help entrepreneurs just kind of think through some of those? So you think, you say you bring alternate ideas or perceptions or whatnot in the situation. How do you guys kind of help us think through those problems?
Well, actually, we often start with models or theories or constructs of just how generally business can work. And so we'll talk about things, for example, in any organization, there's two sides to it. There's a people side and a system side. And the people side is like all the knowledge and experience and everything that makes people who they are, right? It's the languages that they speak and their age and ethnicity and just everything that they brought in the door. They showed up that way. And the systems are the processes and procedures that the company offers those people to allow them to do their jobs as best they can. And over time, that combination of people and systems can start to morph. So, you've got some key employee who's been there for 10 years. And originally we hired that person to do job X. But over time, they've pulled in a little bit of this and a little bit of that. They kind of dropped this little bit off because they didn't really like doing it. Nobody noticed that they dropped it anyway. And before you know it, this job is not the job that we originally hired them for. And when that person leaves, and everybody will leave, that's one important fact. It's a fact of humanity. We will leave one day somehow. And so when they leave, it becomes really hard to replace them because they don't have a job. They're not a project manager, say. They're Joe. How are we going to find another Joe? And when we do find someone else, often they don't know even what they're supposed to be doing because they don't know what Joe's job was. They know what a project manager did. And when that person comes in and things go wrong, there starts to be this thing where, that new person, Jane, she doesn't know what she's doing. Joe was so good at this. He always got right. He was amazing. Yeah, bring back Joe, but Joe's off fishing in the Bahamas and has no interest in coming back and working for you. And what we know to be true is 9 times out of 10, this isn't a problem with Jane, right? It's not a problem with her being good at her job or not. It's more that the company has not provided the systems and processes for her to do that job well. Mm-hmm. And so that's an example of a perspective we might offer. And when we offer that and tell that story, often leaders will opt in and say, yes, that's what happened here.
Yeah.
And because I don't know, but if it did happen there, I know how to deal with that.
And so, the thing is, you guys have seen that so much, like you're like, pretty sure that's what happened here.
Well, but you never know. Well, There's so many different alternatives.
But yeah. And that is a common thing. That's another thing. Like, every time you're speaking here, giving examples, I immediately go to my own business. I'm like, yep, I've seen that. Yep,
right. And that's and when you started your question with like, how do you wrangle these leaders? Like, they can be pretty hard headed. They don't necessarily want to listen. Well, that's how, by telling stories that they either relate to or they don't. I'm not telling them what's wrong or what's right. They are making that decision.
Yeah. How do you think through, I guess, symptoms versus like the underlying problem? Often people are complaining about the symptoms of a problem and don't realize that, the problem's actually this, not, as in your case, Jane,
Mhm.
right? Like
Yeah.
Jane, the employee that just got thrown into a mess, like she's not really the problem, right, in that situation. So how do you kind of think through that, or how should leaders like distinguish between those two?
Yeah, well, there's a couple ways I can answer that. One way to answer it is, yeah, you got to look at the root cause. And often when we see the symptoms, we can compare what that organization, what systems and processes they have in place relative to best practice for an organization of their size. So that's one way to approach it, is just to see, do they have the typical stuff? Do they have a budget and a dashboard and job descriptions and performance management system and an employee handbook and process flows and like the typical best practices to avoid common problems? So that's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is that everything good in that business can ultimately be traced back to the leader, and that's true about the bad as well.
Yep, whole
And
100%.
so there's usually a combination of the leadership orientation that might be helpful to have a little nudge in one direction or the other, and the systems and processes that they do or don't have in place.
Yeah.
And sometimes that Jane character also just is a lazy, good for nothing person, and they made the wrong hire. That happens too, but
Yeah.
it's not usually the
Yeah,
problem.
it's
And
usually not that. Yeah.
and in fact, usually, even if if Jane really isn't capable, that's a problem with the way we hire,
Yeah.
not a problem with Jane the human.
Yeah, exactly. It's either your hiring process or your onboarding or, training process.
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
like, everything is, people have different skill sets and are better at different things, and you try to hire towards that. But everything is even learnable to a degree, right? Like, so it's, everything's a skill. Like, if
Yeah.
you're a capable human being, Jane could learn these things. But, obviously if you don't have any systems or onboarding or any of that stuff, it's
Yeah.
certainly not Jane's fault, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk about strategic planning and it not being like an annual event, and only an annual event. Can you talk to that, the importance of that? What's your thoughts on all
I'd be delighted. One of the very challenging things in our business development process, is that somebody will call, often an assistant or the office manager, and ask if we can facilitate strategic planning. And we can. The issue, though, is that planning as an event, like a one-time deal, isn't really going to give you the return on investment of time. And they call
that?
around looking for pricing. The pricing really isn't even the issue. The issue is taking X number of senior people out of your business for a day or two. That
Yeah.
is the cost. So the first thing is, you've got somebody who's trying to save pennies where they're, tripping over dollars. That's one side. That's just my own annoyance,
It's very
but
common.
it's very common, and it's got the focus is on the wrong thing, because really the cost of this is those people in the room. And if you're going to pull your executive team out or your management team out for a couple days, you darn sure better make sure they're
You're
going
not.
to actually do the things that they decide,
Yeah.
because it was a complete waste of time otherwise. Complete waste of, I mean, maybe not complete, maybe I'm exaggerating. Maybe you get like 10% return on that investment or something like that, but you could get 100% return or even more if you set up the regular systems and cadence to follow up on whatever strategic decisions were made in that initial planning process. So that's one area where I think there could be a lot of improvement, is just thinking of strategy as a process and continuous, like, circular thing, not once a year done, 364 days later, oh, better do that again.
We're going to check
We
that
have,
box, don't we?
yeah, exactly. We've got to look at it all the time.
Yeah, and I've been in, I guess early in my career, I've been in different, types of organizations, really early in my career before I started my business. But I've seen that. I've seen that kind of stuff, to where it's just even in small organizations, clients are working with stuff, and they have, strategic meetings. They pull all these people, pull people out and do
Yeah.
these things. But it, like, I think a lot of it, or at least in my experience, goes back to the leader, where it's like, okay, the leader has these things. They just throw a bunch of ideas at their people, and then a week later, you're throwing 10 different things at them, and like nothing ever like hits the
sticks.
ground and actually moves, because the
Yeah.
leader is just, the leader is this visionary just running around, darting around and throwing things at people and wonder why nothing ever happens. Right?
Yeah, well, and then the other angle is the leader who sits there and says, "Well, I really want them to decide because they have to buy in. And if they don't decide, if they don't buy into this, it's not going to happen." And it's really important, I think, for leaders to understand their role, because their role is actually to be that visionary. It's their ideas that we're looking for. Yeah, you 100% need buy-in, and you 100% need their input, because they have information that you don't.
Mm-hmm.
So input is critical on that team, but the leader is the decider. They have to understand that that is their job.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, to me, that's, that most of that I assume comes from just fear and insecurities
Mm-hmm.
about, making those decisions, which, everybody has that to a degree. I've delayed making decisions for a long time. And the answer here is that I
Absolutely.
knew that I should have, right?
Yeah, well, the behavioral science will tell you we are twice as likely to make a decision that avoids the bad
Yeah.
than we are to make a decision that gets the good.
Yeah.
And
It
so,
is
and
amazing how we lean that way so hard. Yeah.
yeah, and then further, we don't perceive not making a decision as making a decision. So we think it's safe and we won't lose things if we don't make a decision, because we're really bad at predicting the future and seeing that opportunity cost.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's 100%. And in science, like you said, behavioral science, neuroscience, all that stuff, proves that out, that's the default position of human beings.
Yep,
The
exactly.
fear of missing out is a big driver.
It is. It is. And fear of missing out, you'd think would
Or
push
fear of
people to
loss
make.
too, right? But yeah.
Well, but no, but I love that you brought that up, because fear of missing out is the way to frame things to help against that fear of loss. So, oh my gosh, if I cut off that part of my business, I'm going to lose all that revenue, is one way to think about it. Another way to think about it is, if I don't cut off that revenue, what am I going to miss out on because I'm busy chasing that unprofitable work?
Yeah, that swirl or whatever. And yeah, and it's, so I'm really deep into, Dr. Benjamin Hardy and Dan Sullivan, they have a bunch of books, and Ben Hardy's latest book came out, The Science of Scaling. And a lot of that is this of like, how do you separate the noise from the real stuff, right? And we're so not clear and focused enough that, and our goals aren't big enough and specific enough that our brain can filter out all the stuff that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And so to reach whatever your goal is, first off, most people don't have clear, goals at all, and then let alone they're not clear enough. And I love the book and the framework they have in there of just like the idea of setting impossible goals, because it makes almost everything in your life not relevant. You know what I mean? It strips everything out, and it's like, okay, it's these three things that I need to do, and that's the only thing that matters, because my goal is so big, and that's the of the whole deal.
Yeah, and Jim Collins talked about that, 40 or 50 years ago. I don't know what it was, with the BHAG, the idea of
BHAGs,
and a big, hairy, audacious goal, and send a man to the moon and bring him back safely, and nothing else mattered unless it contributed to that goal. And BHAGs are really hard to set well. We work with clients all the time on trying to figure that out, and they'll say, well, I want to get to 100 million. Which doesn't really like pluck the heartstrings of most of
what does that mean?
Yeah, but it's measurable, which is nice. But yeah, coming up with those big, hairy, audacious goals, and then offering different perspectives on how you might accomplish that and what is getting in the way. So just using that behavioral science, using those perspectives to allow people to see things a little different.
Yeah, and part of what else he talks about in that book is like using time as a tool. By putting your big impossible goals on what you think is an impossible time frame. Even in that book they go into deep of the Kennedy promise of going to the moon, and they make the argument in there is like he gave them way too much time. And actually, if you talk to NASA, all the tests they did and all the training they did with astronauts and whatnot, that so much of that could have been eliminated if they were on a shorter time frame, right? Because they were not optimizing. And he's like, the amazing thing is they gave them like 7 years to do that, and they came in like 3 or 4 months right before the 7-year timeline. He's like, You could almost
Yeah.
predict that they would come in right before the end of the time.
Well, deadlines matter. And I haven't read the book, but
Yeah.
I would argue the other side, which is when stretch goals go awry. You're too young to remember the Ford Pinto, but Ford's challenge was to make a car with a price point of under $2,000 by
Mhm.
1970, and they accomplished the mission. Unfortunately, it was like driving a bomb, and 53 people died when people because they skipped on the safety standards, and
Sure.
the history is littered with examples of that as well. So we have to be careful with these
Yeah.
goals too, and what could go wrong.
Well, yeah, you got to make sure you're actually optimizing for what you want to
Yeah,
optimize for, right? Like,
yeah,
and just having the $2,000 number as the only measurement, maybe that's not what you actually want to be optimizing for. But
yeah.
it's the idea of like just obviously being very clear what you are optimizing for.
Are you looking for a new tax experience? Looking for an advisor that actually brings you high-level ideas and proactively plans so you aren't overpaying your taxes? Or how about one that even just responds and communicates in a timely fashion? If any of that resonates with you, you probably just have a tax preparer and not a tax planner. And it is through the tax planning process where all the value is found. And when tax planning is done right, it has a positive return on investment. I'm Peyton Squires. I'm a CPA and owner of Squires Tax Planning. We work alongside entrepreneurs and high-income earners, helping them pay the least amount of income taxes, both legally and ethically. We have saved our clients hundreds of thousands of dollars through specific strategies, and we guarantee we can find multiple tax strategies that your current tax preparer hasn't told you about. If that interests you, head over to squirestaxplanning.com. There you can take our free assessment to see how likely it is that you are overpaying on your income taxes. From there, you can also book a free tax discovery call with our team to see what it would look like to have us working for you.
So, Tara, can you share a story of a small business that, kind of worked with you guys, went from struggling to kind of how you guys helped them solve that problem or whatever that problem was?
Sure. I love telling stories about my clients. So let's think about a specific company. They're a general contractor, actually, residential, and they focused on renovations. And when we started working with them, the owner, when we started, there was one owner, and he had brought in his childhood best friend. So they were working together, and he was working, let's call him Kevin. He was working 20 hours a day. Small family, young family, working so hard, great guy, making a name for himself in the industry. People started to get a lot of referral customers, but he was drowning in work. And when we first met with him, he had two goals. One goal was that he wanted to be able to just work regular hours. And I told him right from the get-go that lots of people are capable of that, and I didn't know if he was.
Mm.
Because there are some people who, it doesn't matter how much space you create for them, they just fill it with work. So that was one point. The other thing that he really wanted to accomplish is as a child, they'd gone to this specific lake in northern British Columbia, and he wanted to have enough money to buy a property there. So flash forward, the business is about 100x where it was back then. This is 15 years later. He still works like a dog.
Yeah.
Because that's just who he is.
Yeah. He's addicted. He loves it.
but he got that property a year in after working with us, something that he thought was this stretch dream. And he's since brought in other equity partners in the business. He's started other companies alongside. And so he's been able to accomplish a lot of what he wanted to do. So what did we do there? Well, we started with planning. We started with saying, well, what's the goal? We can't move towards
what are we solving
if we don't know
for?
what direction we're going in. And then we started helping put systems and processes in place. So we had process flows for not so much on the business development side, because he was just knocking it out of the park, but more on how do we initiate a project? How do we make sure it runs smoothly? How do we make sure that all I's are dotted and T's are crossed? How do we make sure that referral business keeps coming when he doesn't have his fingers on every single project to make sure that the quality is there. So the quality is still there, but it's because of systems, not because of him looking at every single nail hammered in. Yeah.
Yeah. What you described there is common in my industry, at least my business, where it's like, you get kind of the founder, the owner, and like no systems are built, and like the founder just shows up and does his magic and makes a sale, and everybody's like, wow, nobody can do it like him or whatever, right? Which isn't true. But like,
well, it's true that nobody can do it exactly like him.
Correct. Yeah.
People may be able to do it better.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And for training and systems, like, they may be better. And in a lot of situations, they're not, just because it's the owner and the passion and the confidence and stuff. But like, this Mike guy is amazing at it, right? Like you can get your people at least close to that, right, into an acceptable level. That's some of that, and some of it I even think of my own situation is like, I had my executive coach tell me one time that as I started building systems and whatnot, and everything stops going through me, and he goes, first thing he ever said to me was, what are you going to do about your addiction to be needed, for being needed, right? And I was
Absolutely.
like, wow.
Yeah.
And the more I thought about it, the more he's right? And my unwillingness to not control that or step out of that. Got any thoughts on that or
Yeah, well, I mean, it's so common, right? Firefighting can be exhausting. Like if you are the firefighter in the business, it's like we sometimes go down to the Pacific coast of Mexico in the winter to get away from the Canadian
the amazing
winter.
weather you have in Vancouver.
Yes. And I'm not a very strong swimmer, right? But I see all these people playing out in the water, out in the waves. And so I want to go out there. It looks like fun. But every time I start crawling my way out into the ocean, the waves like crash me down and smash me. I'm on the bottom of the ocean like a turtle on its back. And I get up and I'm sputtering and another wave comes. And that's what it can feel like sometimes in business when you're the firefighter, right? It's exhausting. It's so hard. And you sort of crawl back on the beach and look at how are those people having so much fun over there, right? What are they doing that I'm not doing? It's not right. And so that's one side of the firefighting. But the other side of the firefighting, as you said, is it can feel really good to be Mighty Mouse and save the day. And when my one kid was in kindergarten, one of the other kids' fathers was a firefighter, or like an actual firefighter. And he used to show up to pick up in the full garb, like with an axe and a hat and all the things. And the kids would go wild. They'd be like, a firefighter, right? He was a hero.
Yeah.
He's the guy who saves the day. And there's a lot to be said for that kind of ego and like the feeling that gives you to save the day. But here's what I learned. What I learned is that real firefighters spend the majority of their time not fighting fires. The majority of their time is spent preparing to fight a fire. They're eating well and exercising and playing an inordinate amount of Trivial Pursuit and doing all sorts of things so that they're ready to go when they're needed. And I think that, again, it's that shift in perspective. You can't be a firefighter 24/7 for your whole life. It won't work. So let's make sure we're preparing for actual fires and not just running around stepping on little matches here and there and everywhere.
I feel like I'm just sitting here taking this advice straight, which is good. And I swear, that's a huge benefit of this podcast for me is that I sit here and get reminded of the same things that I need to learn over and over and over. And, obviously, the listeners, as well, and get a lot of value of that. But it's funny when I don't necessarily listen to every podcast again because I don't want to hear my voice all the time. But when I do, it's amazing when I turn on some of these episodes. I'm like, oh, that's speaking right to me. And my, so just listeners, I have all the same problems. Right.
Right. And I'll also say that one of the things that you don't seem to have is you have a coach. So you didn't treat figuring something out as an event. You figured it was a process. And so that means you have to keep revisiting. We're hard-headed, this human thing. We have well-worn paths of behavior that we go down. And, if you've ever moved houses or moved offices and you find yourself driving home and then realize you showed up at the wrong place, I mean, you are operating a complex piece of equipment that, and it can kill people too, and you aren't even paying attention.
You're not even there.
and it turns out that 95%, literally 95% of what we do is habit. You need someone beside you to say, hey, what about this? What about, don't you remember? And you're like, oh yeah, I'm so glad I got to learn that again for the first time. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's where it comes to, like, humans need reminded. Like, we need reminded a lot more than we need taught. Like, we just need to keep soaking in the same stuff over and over again until we finally, like, oh yeah, okay, I get it. And that can take a long time sometimes for us, right?
Yeah, it's sort of like learning a language, right? If you're learning French, at first you're sort of learning some words, and then you're living in France, and then eventually one day you dream in French and you realize, okay, I got it. Yeah. I know that now. Well, think about how long that takes.
Yeah, and it's important to realize too, is like, this game never ends either, right? Like you said, it's a process. There's not some finish line. There, you know what I mean? There never is some finish line, because as soon as you solve a problem, that's going to give you a new perspective, and you're going to spot, 3 more problems. Like, the problems multiply, right? And it's a never-ending game, and like, you can take it as far as you want to take it. Some people want to go really far, and some people don't. It's just to make sure you're making a conscious choice of how far you want to go or not, right? And I think that's the biggest thing. I think entrepreneurs get into a business, they're not really sure why they did it. Maybe it's freedom. Maybe it's, I just don't want to work for a person anymore, or maybe I want to make a lot of money. But like, there's no clear, like, what are you building? And I ask a lot of my clients that, especially when they come in with me on money stuff. And I'm like, hey, everybody comes in here and says they want to pay less in taxes and make more money. I'm like, to what end? Like, what are we solving for, right? I think it's just super important to have that bigger perspective, because, like, if people don't know what they want, they're going to run down and climb up a ladder and realize, wow, this is not even what I wanted to do, 20 years later, right?
Yeah. So there's that side of it. Like, they need to know where they're going, and they also need to know it's all going to end.
Yeah.
It's all going to end. You don't get to live forever. That's the thing I can guarantee. So time's the most valuable resource you have. What is it that you really want? Because some people will say, I just really want to make a lot of money, but that's just a metric.
And it's
just a measure.
You're going to lose so much motivation. I mean, that's only motivating for so far. I mean, I guess some people that are very, very out there, that they're really motivated by that, but
even them, that's just their measuring stick.
Yeah.
They want prestige, or they want, people, they want their dead father to look down on them and have pride, or, whatever. I don't know what they're trying to go for, but it usually isn't money. Money is a means to an end.
Yeah, you're right. It's just the stick they use to measure.
Yep.
Right? And it's, once again, a lot of it comes back to whatever they're trying to prove to their parent or somebody or whoever that they're valuable.
Yeah.
And money's how they choose to do it.
Right.
Which, no judgment on that, I guess.
It's a good. It's a very effective measuring stick.
Yeah, and I have no judgment on it, as long as, like, you're consciously picking that. Where it gets me is like, hey, if you don't realize what you're doing here unconsciously, right? And it's an interesting thing for sure.
Or they're dreaming for something, but not really. Like, I would really like to win the lottery. Sincerely, if I won the lottery, I wouldn't be. I wouldn't even be like a 0% angry, like nothing. I would be happy to do it. I never buy lottery tickets, but I'm cool with winning it. That'd be great. And so sometimes when we know what we want, we also have to put a little effort behind it to get there.
There's plenty of people that'll sell that dream on the internet or whatever, where it's like, I make $1 million in 60 days or whatever, or something. I mean, it's just outlandish, silly stuff. But, like, man will always fall for, the something for nothing.
The easy fix. Yeah.
That's really easy for us to fall through. And even if you hit that, even if somehow, like, that was true, like, you wouldn't even value it. You wouldn't.
If it was easy, no.
Yeah, you wouldn't value it at all.
No, struggle makes it valuable. That's the worst. That's the worst truism. Is there has to be bad to be good. You can't just only have good. It's brutal.
and honestly, it very well could put you in a way worse psychological position because
Yeah.
you have all this, you feel guilty, you know you didn't earn it, and many people just completely burn their lives down with it because they
Yeah.
didn't have the skills and whatever to even take care of that kind of stuff. So how do you help, managers and business owners navigate, difficult conversations, whether employees, whether internally, externally? You guys kind of got a philosophy or how do you guys help people do that?
So I actually taught that class yesterday in management training.
Nice.
So we do give people frameworks and structures to have a difficult conversation. I think a couple things to know about difficult conversations. One is when you don't have them, it costs a lot of money. And so it's really important to know that avoiding the difficult conversation, in fact, in many cases, and I mean this sincerely, it can cost people their lives. If you see that, not that we only work in construction, but if you see that guy going up in an unsafe way onto some building because, I've been doing this since God was born and I know how, and you don't say something because you don't want to get into some altercation, literally that could cause someone to lose their life. And there are a lot of examples of that. But there are much smaller examples as well. So it's a difficult conversation if you are avoiding it or uncomfortable about it. And a difficult conversation can be on like any topic. It could be, you have spinach in your teeth, or you didn't do that work properly, or I got to tell you, we got a serious body odor issue going on here, or whatever it is. It could be anything.
Seriously.
All of those are difficult conversations. And while I think it's very important for people to examine their motives and figure out why they want to have that and really plan for it, I also know that my number one piece of coaching advice, like the number one question that I ask when I'm coaching every time, almost no matter what, is, have you talked to them about it yet?
No, I've just been sitting here in my room fuming about it.
Exactly. Or, well, sort of. I mean, I did
What does
one
that mean?
time 4 months ago. And so this is like a primary foundational management skill, I think, and really just for life, is finding your personal mechanism, the way that you are most authentic in bringing up difficult subjects, whatever they may be. I want to raise. That's a really hard conversation. How many people avoid that conversation because, well, I'm sure we'll talk about it next month, and I don't want to bother my manager, and, well, our pay thing happens, blah, blah, blah. Like all of that nonsense. It's nonsense.
Yeah.
It's
Leads to
just
resentment
fear.
too.
And and eventually, why haven't they talked to me about money yet? I haven't had a raise in 3 years. Like, they just don't care about me at all. Well, maybe, but maybe you should have just said something 3 years ago. It could, both things can be true, but there's only one thing that we have the control over, the agency over, which is, have you talked to them about it?
Yeah. And if it's an ongoing problem, the answer is almost always no, like not directly, right? Like otherwise we would have resolved this or found some sort of solution.
Right. Exactly. People have a really hard time meeting your expectations if they don't know what your expectations are.
It's true. And that's most human problems, almost all human problems come from like unmet expectations, right? Like an unsaid unmet expectations, right? To where it's like literally, oh, well, in my head, I thought you were going to do this.
It's common sense, right?
Yeah, common sense, right? Like, and it's amazing, especially, in relationship and between genders and everything, we're wired a little bit differently, and that most of the problems are just because we think, we just think differently and have different expectations, and we're not clear or willing to have that difficult conversation of like, hey, I like this, and this is why I like this.
Yeah, and we're all the stars of our own movies as well. So it's possible that your boss hasn't looked at your compensation for 3 years, but I doubt it's because they hate you.
Yes. Probably got something else in plate.
There may be something else that's in their mind that isn't you, and so you have the ability to raise this back into their consciousness. I think if they haven't talked to you about it, it probably has almost nothing to do with you. which is a hard thing to believe. What do you mean they don't care about what, my compensation? Like, what? You think they don't care? Well, it's not that they don't care.
Yeah, it's not that I
It's
don't
just
care.
not the priority.
Yeah. 100%. Tara, this is it's been a great conversation. I appreciate you coming on. What's the best way people can get to know more about you, your company, and just everything you guys do?
Yeah, well, they should come check us out at bellrock.ca and find me on LinkedIn, Tara Landis. I'm pretty out there, pretty easy to find.
Love it. Tara, any piece of parting advice for the listeners before you go?
Yeah, if you can throw money at a problem, that's the easiest problem you're ever going to have to solve. So just do that.
Yeah. If money can solve a problem, you don't have a problem.
Yeah, exactly. Just do that.
Yeah. Well, Tara, I appreciate you. Like I said, appreciate the work you guys do. And listeners, we'll catch you next time.
Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. If you found it valuable, please rate, review, and share it. That is the best way to help us build this and reach more people, as we're trying to accomplish our goal of help creating more healthy, wealthy, and wise entrepreneurs. You can follow us on social media by searching for me, Peyton Squires, or going to PeytonSquires.com. On the website and social media, we're always sharing tips of personal growth, and there we can actually interact. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks, guys.